Hey guys, welcome back to Adventures in Aviators. Today we are chasing some waterfalls here on the beautiful island of Mauritius. We're going to Eau Bleu, or blue water for you English speakers. As we always do, we're going to be looking at the categories of location, trail traffic, plants and wildlife, facilities, and the payoff. And we're going to be ranking them on a scale of 1 to 5 dodo birds. Well, by far one of the hardest things about this hike is finding the hike. And really, once you actually get to this location, the hiking is relatively minimal, but this is a reasonably hard to access area of the island. Eau Bleu is in the central and south central part of the island, and as you become familiar with Mauritius, you'll find that there's less roads in this area, and the roads that are there are not as easy to navigate and a little bit windy. And for that reason, it is not necessarily easy to access unless you are near Maheborg. It's only about 15 minutes from Maheborg, but it is a full hour from Grand Bay up in the north, and actually over an hour from Le Morne in the southwest. As you do get close, you're going to be looking for Cluny Road or B83, and there are actually some location markers on Google Maps which aren't too awful, but here's the hardest part is knowing exactly when you're there, because there will be no signs, there's not really a parking area, and you kind of have to figure out just looking for, basically here on the left, or on the, well, that'd be the east side, you're going to be looking for a dense series of trees near kind of this key turn in the road. The road bends right here, and that's the best thing that I can tell you that lets you know that you're in the right area. Now, I've been here a couple different times. One time I was here, there was actually a little bit of a parking area that was available to the west, but at other times there have been barricades up in this area, and so we've had to park kind of in one of these field entry areas. So it is not the easiest parking by any stretch of the imagination when you get here, but hopefully you're in for an adventure, because that is what you're getting on this hike. So there's a little bit of a path on the north and east side of this road, but the key is getting there, and there are only a few access points to get there. In the meanwhile, you're going to be on the road, which you need to watch out for traffic on this road, specifically these really massive garbage trucks. You are very close to the island's one landfill, and so these guys are big and they are cruising, so make way for them and watch out for them when you're turning onto the road and when you're walking on the road. But eventually you should find one or two areas where you can access the path easily. But for location, because it's not particularly close to anything but Maheborg, and Maheborg doesn't have nearly as much happening as other parts of the island, I'm only going to give this 2 dodo birds. Now on the plus side of this, because it is not exactly near much else, and because the parking situation is pretty hard, this does mean that trail traffic is often very low here. Again, I've been here a couple of different times. I have seen people on both occasions, but it has only really been one group of people on either occasion. Now I should mention that in theory there are actually several different waterfalls that you can try to find as a part of this hike. I've only found a couple of them. We haven't been here when we were like going as a destination very often. We're normally on our way somewhere else. But you do need to be kind of just careful as you're navigating this area, because the trail is along the top of the rim of this kind of river gorge, and not all of the waterfalls are particularly easily accessible at all, so you shouldn't expect to easily get down to each of these waterfalls, and there are several of them here, but each one is quite pretty and large, and so even if you're just hit one or two, you're gonna leave satisfied. But because this is a known hike, a well-known hike, but there's not a lot of people that frequent it, I'm gonna give this 4 out of 5 dodo birds. Now with plants and wildlife, you know, that's not really why we're here, right? We're here to go chase a waterfall, and so this has waterfalls in spades, and oftentimes they're really pretty. That said, all of this waterway comes from a reservoir upstream, and sometimes that can actually be turned off when water conservation is an issue on the island. And I have visited this place when the waterfalls were not going at all. So again, they can completely shut off this water source up at the reservoir. So there's not a guarantee that this waterfall will always be going. That said, I think I've been 3 times, 2 times it was going. So as long as you're going during somewhat of a rainy season, you should be able to expect to see the waterfalls flowing. The jungle and forest around the riverbed is quite dense, and you'll see that you have to climb down some roots and different things like that, and the forest area is quite beautiful here. That does mean there's plenty of mozzies, but you wouldn't expect to see many other animals in this area, so I'm only going to give it 3 out of 5 dodo birds. When it comes to facilities, there's not real parking, there are no bathrooms, there are no signs. You're pretty much on your own in this hike, which only gets you 1 dodo bird. But all that said, if you make it down here and you find a place to park and you get across the road and are up for an adventure, climbing down some vines and whatnot, Man, you do get some really great access to these beautiful waterfalls. Here you can see this couple, they've made it down there. They are quite happy. They're quite happy because they actually just got engaged. Not a bad place for an engagement. Nice job, you two. But depending on the waterfall that you're at, you're certainly welcome to take a dip in there. Just always, of course, be careful. There's no emergency services particularly nearby. You'd have to go down to Maheborg for that. And this is not an easily accessible place for them. So, of course, just be careful. Take care of one another. But waterfalls are awesome, and this is a great place to enjoy them. Particularly if you're on your way somewhere or coming from a different hike, this is a great way to stop in and cool off. Of course, the name indicates that the water is nice and blue here and very photogenic, which gets us 5 out of 5 dodo birds. So if you're up for an adventure, you know, the hike itself is very short, depending on how many of the waterfalls you're going to try to find, but the very closest one is only probably a couple hundred meters from the parking areas. But what a beautiful spot. Not necessarily easy to access, as you have to walk down all of these routes and kind of just be steady as you go, especially if it's wet. But so another relatively easily accessible waterfall location on the island that you don't need a guide for, so I definitely recommend this area. Of course, leave this place cleaner than when you found it, and we will see you next time.